There is a Greek word hiding underneath every healing story you have ever read in the Gospels. The word is haptomai, and it does not mean a polite brush against a sleeve. It means to grab, to cling, to take hold and not let go. The moment you understand that word, these stories stop being gentle little miracles and start looking like something far stranger. Because in the world Jesus walked into, there was one rule about touch that nobody broke. Uncleanness traveled in one direction, only one. If you were clean and you touched something unclean, a corpse, a sore, a bleeding body, the dirt jumped to you, not the other way around. Health did not flow into disease. Disease flowed into health. That was the law. That was physics as far as anyone knew. Hold on to that. One direction. Because Jesus is about to spend 3 years running it backwards, and almost nobody around him will notice what is actually happening. This is not a story about magic. This is not a story about a man with healing hands. This is not a story about luck or faith as a kind of currency you spend to buy a miracle. This is a story about which way the current flows when a human being takes hold of God. And by the end, you're going to see a war hidden inside a touch, a war over contamination itself, and you're going to see who won it. Let me show you the first one, because it tells you everything. Picture a crowd pressing in on a dirt road outside a Galilean town. Hundreds of bodies, shoulder to shoulder, sweating in the heat, all of them shoving to get close to the teacher everyone is talking about. And down low, near the ground, a woman is on her knees in the dust, crawling between the legs of strangers. She has been bleeding for 12 years. 12. You need to understand what that meant, and it is worse than you think. Under the law of Moses, a woman with a flow of blood was ritually unclean. Anything she sat on became unclean. Anyone who touched her became unclean until evening. The Jewish writings that survived from that era, the rabbinic teaching collected in the tractates on purity, go into exhausting detail about how a bleeding woman was to be kept separate, how everything she contacted had to be washed or destroyed. So for 12 years, this woman had not been touched, not embraced, not held. If she was married, her husband could not come near her. If she had children, she could not pull them into her lap. 12 years of being the thing other people stepped back from. And she had spent everything she owned on doctors who only made it worse. So she does the unthinkable. She decides she is going to reach into that crowd and touch a holy man. By every rule she has ever been taught, she is about to make him unclean. She knows it. That is why she does not ask. She does not stand in front of him and beg. She comes up behind him, low and hidden, and the text says she reaches for the very edge of his garment, the fringe, the tassel, the part farthest from his skin, and she takes hold of it. That is the word, haptomai. She grabs it and clings, and immediately the bleeding stops. 12 years, gone, in the space of one breath. Now watch what Jesus does, because this is the hinge of the entire video. He stops walking. In the middle of a crushing crowd, he turns around and says, "Who touched me?" And his own disciples nearly laugh at him. Everyone is touching you, they say. We are being crushed. Pick a person. But Jesus is not asking about the shoving. He says something none of them expected. He says, "I felt power go out of me." The Greek is dynamis. He felt strength leave his body on purpose, like a current finding a circuit. You see what just happened? Under the law, her uncleanness should have flowed into him. Instead, his wholeness flowed into her. The direction reversed. The woman who could not be touched touched God. And instead of making him dirty, she got made clean. Read that again. That is the thread. Hold it loosely for now, because it is going to get heavier with every story. And notice he does not let her stay hidden. He finds her in the crowd, this trembling woman who expected to be scolded, maybe stoned for what she had done. And he does not call her unclean. He calls her daughter. Daughter, your faith has made you well. go in peace. The first word out of his mouth is a word of family to a woman who had not belonged to anyone in over a decade. Let me show you the second touch because it raises the stakes. There was a man with what the Bible calls leprosy. The Hebrew word is tsara'at, and it covered a range of skin diseases, but the social meaning was always the same. It was a kind of living death. The law in Leviticus required that this man tear his own clothes, leave his hair unkempt, cover his upper lip, and walk through public spaces shouting one word at anyone who came near: unclean, unclean. He had to announce his own contamination so that people could flee from him in time. He lived outside the town, outside the camp, outside every circle of human warmth. How long since someone had touched this man? Years, maybe. Maybe since the disease began. The historian Josephus and the surviving Jewish legal texts confirm just how total this exile was. Lepers were treated, in his words, as no different from the dead. And this man comes to Jesus, falls on his knees, and says something heartbreaking. He does not say, "Can you heal me?" He says, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." If you are willing, he already knows the power is there. What he does not know is whether anyone, even God, would be willing to want him. And here, the Gospel of Mark gives us a word for what happens in Jesus next. The Greek is splanchnisomai. It means he was moved in his gut, in his insides, with compassion. It is the deepest word for pity in the language. And out of that gut-level mercy, Jesus does the one thing the man has not felt in years, and the one thing the law forbids. He reaches out his hand, and he touches him. Stop and feel that. He did not have to touch him. He healed plenty of people with a word from a distance. The law screamed at him not to do this. The whole crowd would have gasped, but Jesus reached across the line that had quarantined this man from the human race, laid his hand on the diseased skin, and only then said, "I am willing. Be clean." And the current ran backwards again. The leprosy did not climb up Jesus' arm. Cleanness climbed down it. The man walked away with new skin and, maybe for the first time in years, the memory of a human hand. There is a quieter one I want you to see, because it shows this was not only for strangers and spectacles. Jesus walks into the home of his friend Simon Peter, and Peter's mother-in-law is in bed burning with fever. No crowd, no drama. The text says simply that Jesus touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she got up and began to serve them. That is it. A sick woman in a back room, a touch, and she is on her feet making a meal. The same power that stopped the hemorrhage and cleansed the leper is the power he uses on a feverish grandmother in a small house. He does not save it for the big moments. He spends it on a tired woman who needed to feel well again. You feel the threat forming? Every single time, the direction is wrong. The world says sickness wins. With him, wholeness wins. Quick word before we go deeper. If this kind of close reading, the original languages, the history behind the verses, is meeting you where you are, consider subscribing and becoming part of this channel. That support is genuinely what makes this work possible. And to those of you already walking with us, thank you. You are in every script we write. Now, let me take you somewhere darker, because the stakes are about to climb. So far, every person Jesus touched was alive, sick, exiled, bleeding, feverish, but alive. Now watch what he does with death itself. There was a man named Jairus, and here is the detail you cannot skip. Jairus was a ruler of the synagogue. He was the religious establishment, the very system whose laws made touching the unclean a sin. This was a respectable man, a powerful man, and he comes and falls at the feet of a traveling teacher because his little girl, 12 years old, is dying. Jesus turns to go with him, and on the way, this is the same crowd, the same road. The bleeding woman grabs the fringe of his robe. The two stories are stitched together on purpose. A man whose daughter is 12, a woman who has bled for 12 years. The gospel writers want you to hold them side by side, but the delay costs everything. While Jesus is still speaking to the woman, messengers arrive. Do not trouble the teacher any longer, they say. Your daughter is dead. Now, there is a new line Jesus is about to cross, and it is the most serious one in the entire law of purity. Touching a corpse made you unclean for 7 full days. 7. A dead body was the highest source of contamination there was. Numbers chapter 19 lays it out without mercy. To touch the dead was to take death into yourself. Jesus walks into the house, past the mourners who laugh at him when he says the girl is only sleeping. He clears the room. He takes the dead child by the hand. He grips it. And he says 2 words in Aramaic that Mark preserved exactly as they were spoken. Talitha koum. Little girl, get up. And her spirit returns, and she stands, and he tells them to give her something to eat. He touched a dead body, and death did not flow into him. Life flowed out of him into her. Read that again. Do you see the thread now, fully? Under the law, the unclean contaminate the clean. That was the one direction. But when you take hold of Jesus, when his hand closes around yours, the entire current reverses. Disease does not spread to him. Health spreads from him. Death does not infect him. Life infects you. He is not catching what is wrong with us. He is overriding it. Holiness in him is the contagious thing. And once you see it, you cannot stop seeing it. There was a deaf man with a speech impediment, and Jesus put his fingers right into the man's ears and touched his tongue. And the man heard the first words of his life. There was a blind man at Bethsaida, and Jesus put spit on his eyes and laid hands on him. And this is the only healing in all 4 Gospels that happens in 2 stages. The man first seeing people who look like walking trees, then a second touch, bringing the world into focus. Even there, the message is the same. Wholeness, transferred by contact, flowing the wrong way down the wire. There were whole towns where the sick lined the marketplaces and begged just to touch the edge of his cloak as he passed. And the text says, all who touched it were made well. Crowds of contagious, untouchable, exiled people reaching for the hem of one man. And every one of them came away cleaner. Not him, dirtier. Which brings us to the last person Jesus ever touched before the cross. And it is the one that breaks the pattern wide open. It is night in a garden called Gethsemane. Soldiers and a mob come to arrest him. And Peter, trying to defend his teacher, pulls a sword and swings and cuts off the ear of a man in the crowd. John alone gives us his name, Malchus, a servant of the high priest. Think about who this is. This is not a desperate sick woman. This is not a begging leper. This is an enemy. This is part of the armed party that has come to drag Jesus away to be killed. By every instinct you and I have, this is the one person who deserves nothing. And Jesus, hours from the cross, already sweating, already abandoned, stops everything. He reaches out his hand one more time. He touches the ear of the man who came to arrest him, and he heals him. Sit with that. The last healing touch of his entire life was given to an enemy who would not even thank him in the dark on the way to his own execution. Here is the modern bridge, and you already know it in your body. When you walk past someone who is sick, your instinct is to lean away. When a child reaches towards something filthy, you pull the small hand back. Every healthy person carries this reflex. Protect what is clean, recoil from what is not. It is wired into us. We flinch from contamination because we are afraid of catching it. And every single person in these stories had spent their lives on the wrong side of that flinch. They were the ones people leaned away from. And then a man walked through their world who never once flinched, who reached toward the exact thing everyone else reached away from, because he was not afraid of catching what they had. He knew which direction the power ran. Now let me gather them all in front of you. The bleeding woman did not get scolded. She got called daughter. The leper did not get kept at a distance. He got a hand on his skin. Jairus did not get to keep his respectability. He got his little girl back, alive. Peter's mother-in-law did not get left in her fever. She got back on her feet. The blind man did not get half a miracle. He got a second touch until he could see. And Malchus did not get the judgment he had earned. He got healed by the very man he came to destroy. That is the thread, stated as plainly as I can say it. Under the law, the unclean contaminate the clean. With Jesus, holiness is the contagious thing. He did not catch our death. He gave us his life, and he did it by touch. So here are the three things to carry out of this. First, the factual one. In the Gospels, healing by touch is never just kindness. It is a deliberate, public reversal of the entire purity system. Every time Jesus touched the untouchable, he was making a claim about who he was. That uncleanness had finally met something it could not contaminate. Second, the personal one. You do not have to be clean before you reach for him. Every person in this video came to Jesus while they were still unclean, still bleeding, still diseased, still dead. Not one of them got cleaned up first. They got cleaned up by the touch itself. You are not too far gone to grab the hem. And third, the one I want to leave on your chest. There is no contamination you carry that flows the wrong way when you take hold of him. Whatever you think disqualifies you, whatever you are sure would make even God lean away. When you reach for Jesus, it does not jump to him. His wholeness jumps to you. That is the entire direction of the cross. He took hold of our death so that we would catch his life. So let me leave you with a question, and I am not going to answer it for you. If that is true, if the current really does run backwards, if holiness is the contagious thing, then what is the part of you that you have been keeping just out of his reach? Certain it was too unclean to touch him with? Tell me below. Out of all of them, the woman, the leper, Jairus, the blind man, Malchus, which touch hit you the hardest? Even one word in the comments. I read them. Subscribe if this changed the way you read a single healing story. Share this with someone who has been feeling untouchable lately, someone who has been living outside the camp in their own way. And may the God who reached out his hand to the one person everyone else stepped back from reach out to you right where you are. Today, God bless you.